Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Swallowed Star Part 190 based on novel. So let's start. Once they had lost most of their powerhouses, how would the Southeastern Fort and Myriad Beasts Mountain Pass supposed to defend against the two armies without any reinforcements? It was even possible to say that Samijina was not in the wrong. While he did act selfishly, as long as he could penetrate the Southeastern Fort in a single stroke, none of it mattered anymore to the overall battle strategy. Whether it was the demon god Emperor or the demon god of death, their greatest mistake was assuming the humans had the same strength as before. They had missed the true hidden power of the humans, nor did they understand that the eternal heroes had emerged. From a Seratin perspective, this was not even a mistake. After all, were there anyone who could have predicted this? However, because of this, the situation completely changed and the absolute advantage the demons possessed began to disappear. The humans of the Southeastern Fort celebrated as the demon army rested. This should have been a relatively peaceful night to both sides. However, the peace was broken. At a Seratin time, the tower before the Southeastern Fort vanished silently. The demons obviously discovered that, but they did not pay too much attention to it. Caia must have returned to the Southeastern Fort to rest after healing. As night descended, the starlight and moonlight happened to be extremely dim, perhaps due to all the killing earlier. Dark clouds slowly gathered and rain fell. It actually began drizzling. However, the demons were highly resistant to environmental factors. Even when it rained, the demons sleeping in the wilderness did not wake up. They were just too tired. Even the demon gods all rested. The battle had just ended. Although they were in very low spirits, they had never thought the Southeastern Fort would try do anything. It grew deeper into the night and the rain fell harder. A demonic wolf that happened to be sleeping in a low-lying area woke up after choking on the rain. Cough cough, climbing up, the bulky demonic wolf glanced at the sky bleary-eyed and cursed inside, "Even the sky is against me, raining tonight." He looked around and knew there was clearly no chance for him to get a tent, but he had to try to find a higher place, hopefully with a certain amount of overhead coverage to sleep. The continued fighting made his body ache. Even his leg had a deep wound. The stinging pain when the rain got in it irritated the demonic wolf. Suddenly, the air right before him twisted slightly. Afterwards, he felt a chill in his neck, as if something hot sprayed out from there. All of his power drained from his body immediately. With a sway, the demonic wolf slowly collapsed onto the ground under the support of some force. In the final moment of his life, he vaguely saw a black figure flash past. Caia gently flickered through the air. Her skillful concealment of her aura made her seem like the wind. Wherever she passed by, the demons sleeping outside that were still unconscious would lose their lives. Very soon, she approached the center of the demon encampment. Around a dozen demon god pillars stood there in an orderly manner, but they shone with extremely dim light now. Samijina's demon god pillar was not there. The four fiend kings were still fighting over who would inherit the position of the demon god of death. In order to prevent anyone from getting in the way, the remaining fiends all gathered there. After reaching the center of the demon encampment, she did not continue any further. Instead, he stopped. She checked the time and hid herself away again, silently waiting for something. 10 minutes later, Caia reappeared once more. "It's time," she murmured to herself. She raised her right hand and pointed in the air. A pure white light immediately expanded and suddenly fell towards the largest dozen or so tents. It was the Tower of Eternity. In the moment the Tower of Eternity appeared, the demon god pillars basically lit up at the same time. Clearly, they had discovered Caia's existence. Figures quickly burst out from the tents, but what received them was a huge tower. "Seal!" Caia called out, and dense, white light immediately erupted from the Tower of Eternity. The resplendent light immediately spread, actually enveloping all of the tents there. Afterwards, the Tower of Eternity also grew to 100 meters tall and immediately fell down. It actually swallowed the dozen or so figures that had burst out from the tents before landing on the ground. The tents that the demon gods occupied were surrounded by the demon god pillars. When the Tower of Eternity appeared, it had slipped between the demon god pillars, so it was immediately discovered by the demon gods. However, the demon gods had never thought the Tower of Eternity would not attack them, but instead envelope them. This was another usage of the Tower of Eternity, suppression. Boom! 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 Rumbles rang out from the tower. Clearly, the demon gods launched furious attacks together in attempt to break out from the tower. However, this was a divine tool, which made it extraordinarily tough. Coupled with how the power of purification suppressed the darkness element that demons used to a certain extent and that their connection to their demon god pillars had been severed, it would take them quite some time to break out. Caia drifted up slowly and landed on the top of the Tower of Eternity. Wielding the sickle of the god of death in her right hand, she produced a series of white slashes in the air. At the same time, she just sat down on top of the tower, merging her domain of purification into the Tower of Eternity. The white light was a signal that represented 15 minutes. The Tower of Eternity could suppress the demon gods for 15 minutes. As the Tower of Eternity shone with the light of purification, figures lit up in various places across the demon encampment. The warrior temple had a total of 21 ninth-step powerhouses. Combined with the 12 eternal heroes, they all appeared across the demon camp and ripped the scrolls in their hands, tossing it at the encampment below. In the moment before, the demon camp had been extremely peaceful, but a moment later, it had become covered in various colors. Clusters of light wreaked havoc in the air with elemental magic, snuffing out the lives of the demons. Everything had happened just too suddenly, so the demons were completely unprepared. The magic scrolls that had been used were at the 7th step at the very least as well and covered a large range. In that moment, the demon camp immediately plummeted into chaos as the terrifying magic erupted and surged with beautiful lights. The demons were just too exhausted. Even when they were attacked like this, many of the demons were reluctant to wake up. Only when they knew they were covered in magic and suffered intense agony did they rouse from their sleep. The battle strategy had been decided after a discussion with Longhausen and the members of the Union at the dragon-resisting mountain pass. The scrolls that the powerhouses used had obviously been accumulated over several thousands of years and they had been put to perfect use. Even when they protected the southeastern fort, Chiao Yonghao was reluctant to use them. Finally, they could unleash their greatest might in destroying the enemy camp. Longhausen's plan could be described as consequential. Who would have thought the southeastern fort would still have the remaining strength to launch a counterattack after such a tough battle? In particular, the 12 eternal heroes were all domain-wielding powerhouses. After using the scrolls, they immediately became a massacre. The battle prowess of 9th step powerhouses went without saying. Without opponents at the same level as them, it was basically a one-sided slaughter. In particular, the 3 9th step mags all cast a forbidden spell each after using the scrolls. In that moment, the demon camp had become a mountain of corpses. The most critical component of this battle was Caia. She had forcefully sealed up the demon gods. If she had not, the losses the demons would be suffering would definitely be minimized if they reacted immediately and used the power of their demon god pillars. As a matter of fact, it might have even been difficult for these powerhouses of the southeastern fort to retreat. Another positive aspect was that the fiends were not present in the camp. Although their main force had been annihilated, the remaining fiends were still powerhouses at the 6th step or higher. Coupled with the 4 fiend kings, if they remained in the camp, they could have fended off the human sneak attack effectively. However, they were too busy fighting over who would inherit the demon god pillars. The conflicting interests of the demons maximized the effect of the human sneak attack. Of course the fiends saw what was going on here, but at this moment, were any of the 4 fiend kings' subordinates willing to give up on the demon god pillar? Of course they turned a blind eye to it and continued their battle. The magic pulses from the Tower of Eternity grew stronger and stronger. Caia had not recovered before and she found it more and more difficult to last longer. However, she knew that with each second longer, the losses the demons suffered would grow larger. Caia became more and more familiar with the usage of the domain of purification. She did not have to worry about running out of power of purification on the battlefield. Demons died in large amounts and a tremendous aura of death would obviously appear. Under the domain of purification, the aura of death would gradually become a part of the power of purification. CAI relied on Thea Boost to maintain the seal, or she probably could not have even lasted a minute. After all, this was the simultaneous attacks from over 10 demon gods. Over 39th step powerhouses doing all they could to massacre the demons. Some of them even just destroyed the provisions of the demons, making it even worse for them despite already lacking resources. The white light from the Tower of Eternity grew brighter and brighter and more unstable. It seemed to flicker with sparks. CAI knew the divine tool had reached its limit. If this continued, the Tower of Eternity would probably be destroyed even if she could continue. The divine tool was the only keepsake that holy necromancer, slumbering Calamity Elux had given to her. Raising the sickle of the god of death high into the air, a pure white ring of light expanded. At the same time, CAI flapped her spiritual wings and flew off into the distance with lightning speed. After lasting for a few more seconds, the Tower of Eternity also turned into a streak of light that followed CAI. When CAI emitted the white ring of light, all of the human powerhouses stopped and quickly fled into the distance, returning to the southeastern fort. Over 10 figures charged out at the same time, but the demon gods really were in a bad shape. They were covered in dust. The Tower of Eternity possessed a tremendous amount of power of purification and weight. When they attacked the tower with their full strength, the overly dense elemental power in the tower lashed them as well. Now that they had emerged after so much difficulty, all of their heads spun. It was also at this moment that a pure white lotus fell down from the air. When the demon gods recovered from being surprised and used great power of their demon god pillars to control the situation, they felt like crying instead. It was just too miserable. Across the entire encampment, there were only a handful of tents that remained standing. Corpses were littered everywhere as powerful elemental storms of magic constantly wreaked havoc there. Their provisions had been burned to a crisp. It was a demon army of over 300,000, but they had become scattered without any unity at all. The entire encampment that stretched several dozen kilometers was a wreck. The losses were innumerable. After a simple discussion, the demon gods reached a mutual agreement. They took action together and dealt with the conflict among the fiends. They appointed a fiend king as the successor of the demon god of death, who then quickly retreated with the demon god of death's demon god pillar with them. They had to retreat. After the setback that night, there less than a third of their mighty army of 500,000 remained. Most importantly, they had lost all of their morale as well. The southeastern fort possessed over 39th step powerhouses, with over a dozen of them being able to wield domains. That was more than what they had. How were they supposed to continue the battle like this? CAI was especially terrifying. What if she launched a sneak attack against them again? What were they supposed to do? There was only one way to avoid being sealed by the Tower of Eternity, which was to scatter the demon god pillars. However, separating them would lead to other problems. Would they be defeated individually? Were any of them bold enough to separate from the group? In the end, the demon gods decided to retreat back to the Nerix province and wait for the demon god emperor's orders. As they regrouped, they would also find a way to resupply their provisions. The food that an army of several 100,000 could get through in a day was an astronomical amount. Afterwards, the southeastern fort carried out the logistics for the aftermath of this battle. When the demon army retreated, they only had 27,000 troops remaining, with many of them injured. They had basically suffered an overwhelming defeat at the hands of the southeastern fort. The only pity was that they had only managed to kill 2 demon gods. However, the threat that the southeastern fort was under was completely nullified now. Even if the demon army returned, it would be very difficult for them to breach the southeastern fort with the combination of the 6 vacations. The morale in the fort had reached an unprecedented high as well. With sufficient rest, they would be able to recover their peak condition very soon and continue protecting this mountain pass. However, CAI had no time to rest. After the sneak attack at night, she silently left with the 12 eternal heroes, directly flying to the Myriad Beasts Mountain Pass in the south. The battle at the Myriad Beasts Mountain Pass had already started. There were no magical traps there, however. 3 days passed in a blink of an eye, but the demon encampment outside the dragon-resisting mountain pass remained quiet. Is there any news from Sami Jina and Marbas? The demon god emperor summoned the moon demon god Agaz and the star demon god Visago in his tent. Agaz replied politely, according from the news last time, Sami Jina did not let his army rest when he arrived at the southeastern fort and immediately launched an attack. According to the reports of the demon gods there, it's been a day since the battle's begun. The fiends have yet to enter the battle. They are currently in a stalemate with the southeastern fort. The powerhouses in the southeastern fort had surpassed our estimates. A divine tool-wielding marksman has managed to kill Garp is a surprise attack. Garp's fallen in battle. What? The demon god emperor was surprised. Garp's fallen in battle. Yes. And according to the news from the front lines, Garp was sniped before he could properly support the army on the battlefield. Agaz did not let any personal feelings influence his report, but anyone could tell that he was displeased with Garp and Sami Jina. What else is there? The demon god emperor did his best to hold back his fury. While the arcane demon god Garp possessed lackluster battle prowess, his abilities for group support were known as the best among the demons. He could play such a great role on the battlefield that he could even rival Sami Jina. The demon god emperor had purposefully sent him to attack the southeastern fort, but he never expected him to die before making an impact on the battlefield. Agaz said politely, there hasn't been any news since. We should receive accurate news tonight. Marbas and Valefor have yet to send any news from the Myriad Beasts mountain pass, but according to the news last time, they already begun fighting. By now, the battle at the southeastern fort should have reached a conclusion. If Marbas and Valefor move fast enough, their battle should be wrapping up as well. Visago said coldly, Your Majesty, Sami Jina seems to have gone a little overboard. It's bad for unity. If he really does succeed in making it into the humans' territory, the Fiend clan might. He stopped there and did not continue. Ever since he used the prophecy of life, Visago had become especially quiet and much colder. He rarely spoke. The demon god emperor squinted his eyes and looked at Agaz, speed up the delivery of information. Yes. The demon god emperor stood up slowly, it's already been 3 days. Looks like it's time for us to pay a visit to Longhouchen. I think he's also received news from the southeastern fort and Myriad Beasts mountain pass. Agaz said, Your Majesty, shouldn't we wait a little longer for the news from the front lines? It'll take 12 hours at most before the next report arrives. The demon god emperor pondered the suggestion and said, Fine. Let's wait for Sami Jina and Marba's reports of success. The demon god emperor seemed to have ignored Visago's objection earlier, while Visago said nothing more. The situation of the front lines was extremely important. If both armies made it into the Temple Union, then the demon god emperor would be in the absolute position to choose what to do. If they failed to breach the mountain passes, then the demon god emperor would have to change his battle tactics against the dragon-resisting mountain pass. The dragon-resisting mountain pass. Chairman, everything is prepared. The temple head of the Night Temple, Yang Haohan, stood on the top of the walls of the mountain pass and said to Longhouchen. Longhouchen nodded, good. Long Jianyin, who had made his way up to the top of the wall with Yang Haohan, said rather strangely, there's still no activity from the demon god emperor's side. Has he still not received the news? We've already received the news on our side. Longhouchen smiled, there's nothing strange about that. It's all because of Yu Yi's organization. Grandfather, has the battle reports of the Myriad Beasts mountain pass arrived? Long Jianin's face immediately became filled with joy, it's arrived. Marbas and Valefor basically used the same tactic against the Myriad Beasts mountain pass as Sami Jina. They sent in other clans as cannon fodder, before launching a combined attack of Hell Demons and Bear Demons directly under their command. Due to the Hell Demon clan, the Bear Demon clan and the command of the two great demon gods, the other demon gods under their control are weaker compared to Sami Jina. It's unlucky for them to come across Chen Hongyu, that old fox. Chen Yuhong, that old fox, knows how to act just too well. When Marbas and Valefor launched their attack, he only used the original force that the spiritual temple possessed to stop them. With the many powerhouses of the spiritual temple and the careful preparation in response to the accurate information, they did not lose the upper hand at all. They blocked 3 waves of attacks without showing the slightest signs of weakening. Marbas and Valefor became rather impatient, so they sent the demon gods into the battlefield. And they were much more vicious than Samijina, sending in 6 demon gods at the same time. The pressure on the Myriad beasts' mountain pass immediately increased drastically with that, and it became a tough battle. Chen Hongyu began using the troops sent over from the other 5 temples. Every time he used them, they would bring substantial benefit. They were used to their greatest use. Coupled with how the spiritual temple's hidden strength is greater than the warrior temples, they managed to last a day and night. Marbas and Valefor became wrath-frantic. They both knew Samijina was launching a crazy attack on his side and his battle seemed to be coming to an end, so they finally sent out the strongest combination, the bear demons and hell demons, to attack the fort. Long Tianyin could not help but sigh in admiration there. Houchen, the lady you speak of really is outstanding. I really wonder what their organization does. Marbas and Valefor had not received information of Samijina's death, so they still thought he was in a stalemate on his side and close to breaking through. Was it possible for them to not become hurried? All of them treated our union as a juicy chunk of meat and all of them wanted the first bite. With their urgency, problems obviously appeared, while the successful defense of the Myriad Beasts Mountain Pass earlier gave us sufficient time. Cai and the 12 Eternal Heroes finally arrived at the Myriad Beasts Mountain Pass and united with the powerhouses of the Spiritual Temple. Meanwhile, the Eternal Heroes sent to the Spiritual Temple had not fought earlier at all, remaining hidden away. At the same time, after confirming there would be no demons attacking the southern mountain pass, the Priest Temple sent over reinforcements as well. While it was too late to send regular troops, they did ask their 9 Eternal Heroes to help out at the Myriad Beasts Mountain Pass. That amounted to 30 Eternal Heroes. That's 30 domain-wielding powerhouses. When they appeared on the battlefield, they immediately turned the tides. Chen Hong knew that old fox sure knows how to bide his time. Coming under danger several times before, he prevent any of his Eternal Heroes from taking action, lasting until the most critical moment before erupting altogether, taking Marbas and Valefor by surprise. After that, they engaged in a full-scale battle. What made Chen Hongyu even more crafty was that the old fox pulled out a terrifying magic scroll from who knew where. The magic scroll had been passed down by the predecessors of the Spiritual Temple. It was a terrifying summoning spell that opened something called a Hell's Gate. From the Hell's Gate, a total of 3,000 hellhounds of the 8th step emerged and lasted for 2 hours before vanishing. 3,000 8th step hellhounds. Long Haochen gasped. Yang Haohan was shocked as well. After all, out of the troops that the demon god emperor had brought with him, there was only a little more than 1,000 8th step powerhouses. What kind of sight was 3,000 8th step hellhounds? Their destructive capabilities would be so terrifying that they could probably match the 30 light magical traps. And to make matters worse, they were flexible, able to adjust to any situation as well. Long Tianyin said in a touchy manner, "Exactly, right? Chen Hongyu's just too sly. If he gave the scroll to use, then he, the demon god emperor, would probably be in for a beating." Yang Haohan chuckled, "We can't blame him. After all, the union's just been established. Protecting his own temple is obviously most important to him. If it was us, maybe we wouldn't have handed it up either." With 3,000 hellhounds, Marbas and Valefor were probably in trouble. Long Tianyin nodded. The destructiveness of the 3,000 hellhounds was just too terrifying. Even the bear demons were unable to stop them with their defense. They directly created a huge gaping hole among the bear demons and hell demons before engaging in a full-scale battle. In order to protect their own forces, Marbas and Valefor mobilized the entire army to attack the mountain pass. All of the demon gods with them fought as well. The battle took another day and night before victory was determined. Reaching there, his gaze could not help but dim slightly. Out of the 30 Eternal Heroes, 9 fell in that battle. One of the mags blew himself up to heavily injure Marbas after having undergone the demon god transformation. Although Valefor managed to retreat unscathed, his army suffered heavy losses. The demons lost 5 demon gods in that battle. The Myriad Beast's mountain pass did not fall, while the demons lost close to 400,000 troops. When they retreated, they were a defeated army. Out of the 400,000 slain, at least half of them died to the super-forbidden spell Hell's Gate. The destructiveness of the 3,000 hellhounds was just too terrifying. Although he did not witness it with his own eyes, Long Haochen could sense the brutality of the battle from Long Qianin's narration. Whether it was the southeastern fort or the Myriad Beast's mountain pass, the two important battles could be described as meat mincers. In just a few short days, both sides had lost over 500,000 lives. While Marbas and Valefor retreated, they were still alive. However, their losses were on par to Samigina's side. 5 demon gods had died, and even though their demon god pillars remained, the demon gods would not be able to fight again. Most importantly, they had actually lost 4/5 of their elite army of 500,000. It was even greater than the losses on Samigina's side. They were completely incapacitated now. This video will end here.